Hello, everybody, and welcome to Boy Problems. My name is Liz Plank, and this is a show where we unpack the messy, the beautiful, and sometimes infuriating stories behind relationships, identity, and figuring out how to be a human in 2025. It's no small feat. And today's episode, I don't even want to predict what it's going to be about because I feel like it's going to go in a million different directions. Our guest is I want to say dear friend, but I've only interviewed her virtually, but now we're in bed together, so I feel like you're, I can call you a friend now.
Absolutely.
We've reached the threshold.
On that level, yeah.
Anna Malaika Tubbs, Dr. Anna Malaika Tubbs, that's right. She is a sociologist, she's an advocate, and the author of the new book, Erased: What American Patriarchy Has Hidden From Us. She's someone who looks at motherhood, at parenting, and not just as something that people do, but as something that culture depends on and often erases. She also wrote an incredible book called Three Mothers, which we're going to talk about in the show, that is now being turned into like a full-blown series because it was a New York Times bestseller. Duh. For me, having you on hits really close because I froze my eggs. I was absolutely certain I wanted kids, but then the idea of being a mother and being a parent felt like jumping into an ocean with no shore at sight. Like, I wanted partnership, I wanted balance, but the whole idea of being a mom felt really scary. And I think that's relatable to a lot of people who are in this very uncertain time, not just politically, but economically, right? Like, I don't even know what's going to happen a year from now. I don't know if I can handle this financially, and in many other ways. Can I bring on another person, especially with, again, the lack of support sometimes that there is, and just the structure of our society in general. So today we're going to be talking about the real labor of parenting. We're going to talk about the stuff the society refuses to see and how we can reimagine parenthood. Anna, welcome to Boy Problems.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Do you feel on a daily basis a mix of gratitude and rage being a mother in 2025 in America? Or is that just what I think it is as a non-mother?
Yeah, it's all the feelings for sure. And I think because I've always been so amazed by moms, even before I became a mom myself, I've always been so aware of the power of motherhood, the influence of motherhood in times like this where it's kind of insane on a national level. I feel grateful for the moms who day in and day out are still showing up for their children, but who also translate that motherhood into activism and how we see the world and what we're trying to build for our kids.
Wow.
You know, it's like a really inspiring time for us as well.
What is one thing you thought was going to be harder about motherhood that's actually easier? And what's one thing that you thought was going to be easy that's actually harder?
Oh, what a good question. I think the harder parts for me are just making sure I always knew I was going to balance making my passion still a priority and still caring about the things that I cared about pre-motherhood and allowing motherhood to just more so be a growth of all the things that I cared deeply about versus feeling like I was replacing an earlier version of myself. But I think sometimes I just really miss my kids. Like, that's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. You know, it's sometimes when I'm on these trips for work, I feel really sad. I think we see a lot of content out there, you know, of moms who are like, I'm going to go get my own hotel room and I'm going to go be alone. And anytime I do that for work, the whole time I'm like, where are my children? So it's actually really hard for me to be away from my kids.
Whoa.
And I think I thought that would be easier. I don't know why.
Sure. Okay, so you love your kids more than you thought you would.
I guess I don't value my alone time as much as I thought I would.
That's
Maybe
wonderful.
More so
that gives me hope because I feel like that's my fear. And I want you to answer the second part of that question, but I feel like that's my fear and a lot of women's fears going into motherhood is like, am I going to be swallowed by motherhood?
And I think that's because all of my work is so intertwined with my motherhood, and I'm so aware that mothering is not the thing that robs joy from women. It's the way in which motherhood is treated in our nation that does. And when we're aware of that, we can just make things work better for ourselves, and we can demand the support that we need for this role and from our partners and from our families. And when we know we're not supposed to do it alone, we can actually really thrive in motherhood. And I do really love it. And that's not to say that there aren't moments where I'm exhausted or that I'm overstimulated. Like, that all happens as well. I don't have that same, I guess, desire to be like, I need to go be away from my children. And there's nothing wrong with mothers who to do. I have more of a desire to just come back to my family and to my kids, you know, as quickly as possible. And yeah, I think I don't know, I expected to maybe be able to do more days away and not have that phase me necessarily. So I don't know, I think I just really do enjoy my mothering, maybe because I also am very aware, if there's moments that I'm not enjoying it, it's because I'm not receiving the support that I need, and I advocate for that.
Wow, that's such a good point, because I froze my eggs and, you know, at 35, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a mother. But then I had this very visceral moment in the surgery room. Well, they, you know, gave me the sedation. I started being put to sleep, and then suddenly my future child was like in the room with me.
Whoa.
Because I was afraid, you know, when you go down, you go under, it's always a little scary. And so I remember being like, oh, I'm scared. And then I'm going to cry again. Like my future child was like, I'm there with you. And like, you're doing this for me. And like, I'm so proud of you.
Wow.
And like, yeah, it was just like very powerful. That's why we wear sunglasses, okay? Because they can't see us cry, okay?
Let people see it. The vulnerability is so important.
So then I started thinking, oh, maybe I do really want to be a mom. And I think that in the moments where I doubted, it is exactly what you're saying, which is not the role of like, I mean, being a mom is incredible. Like I think about like someone could be my mom to me. Like that's wild. How amazing that you could be that, right? Like a source of comfort, of nurturing, of unconditional love, of like a warm place, safe place, you know, for anyone. I think it's so incredible. But sometimes I've been like, I want to be a dad. I don't want to be a mom. And which makes me think like, oh, I want to be a parent.
Yeah.
But I'm afraid of what parenting means for women in, again, as a Canadian person, as living in America, which is like, not Canada isn't perfect, but it definitely, there's more laws and there's more support and there's more of a recognition.
I mean, just based off of like parental leave.
Parental leave, period.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so what you're saying is, you know, I think there's a lot of ambivalence around motherhood for a lot of young women. And it's funny because there's data that shows that men, it used to be the, you know, stereotype was like men don't want to have kids. And like men are the ones who are like, I don't know, ball and chain. And now men want to get married more. Men want to have babies more than women. And young men, that is. That's interesting information. Because I don't think that that's women turning on their like whatever maternal instinct or whatever, you know, I think the right wants to call it. I think it's women being like, this sounds awful. Like looking at the whole like Sheryl Sandberg, which is like antiquated, but for the millennials in the room, like that model, which for obviously it was a very white model and a very corporate model and a very flawed model, but that model of like, I'm just going to do everything at work and everything in the home and like it's going to be great. That gives me hive. That makes me turn off from motherhood, but maybe it's actually not motherhood that I'm turned off on, right?
100%. I think we know that mothers have high rates of burnout in the US. Like everything you're saying and identifying is not made up. It's not just a feeling. And we have to identify what exactly is causing that, because it's not the child that's causing that. It's actually that we don't have support in place for moms. We don't have affordable childcare for moms. And so a lot of the reasons why I'm able to enjoy my mothering is certain privileges that I have. And those are things that I want us to be able to just have on a national level so that all of us can enjoy it. But for instance, my husband and I can have a nanny to help us with our babies. And I could not live without her. She is one of the most important people in my life. I thank her in the acknowledgement section of my book after my parents and husband. One of the things that I talk about in the book is this model that we were sort of sold when women were told, yes, now you work outside of the home. And of course, this is all like a lot of white feminism, right? Because we know that many women of color were always working, but women were told you can do it all. Work and also be a great mother. But as a nation, we're not going to support you in doing that. You're going to have to figure that out. And one of the reasons for that is it makes it so that mothers feel like they can't win either way. So mothers who work within the home, often referred to as stay-at-home moms, but all mothers are working. And so I say mothers who are working within the home.
Such a good distinction.
It's really important. They are unappreciated and unseen and then taken for granted because people will say, well, you're just doing what mothers are supposed to do. And then mothers who choose to work outside of the home are then told, well, you're not here enough for your children and you're not present enough. There's also all this data, not to get too nerdy about it, but you know I'm a proud nerd.
Yeah, get it, girl. We have a scholar in bed with me today.
The data is always so important. There's all this data that shows that even women who are working outside of the home, they are still doing just as much within the home as their male partners in heteronormative relationships. And the only makeup of relationships where men are doing a little bit more is when their wives are the sole providers. And it's actually not even more. They're just doing just as much.
Stop.
So that's what the data is showing us, right?
Wait. So stay-at-home working men inside the home, we'll put it that way too. They do an equal amount of housework as
they're
women.
the only ones that are doing an equal amount of work. And so this is also where like we have to be aware of that. Like no wonder mothers are like, no, hell no. Because no matter how much I am doing, I am still expected to like carry the invisible labor of mothering. You know, it's all of the like the smallest of details. But one of the reasons that I feel I'm still able to really enjoy my mothering is that I study these things. I'm so aware of it that I can say to my husband, who, you know, my college sweetheart, and we've been together for almost 14 years. We've been married for almost 8 years. We have 3 beautiful children together. He's not always perfect in these regards, but I can say, hey, you know what's happening right now? I'm holding invisible labor and you need to step up. And sometimes those conversations can be difficult, but if women are not aware of this data, you know, why it's happening, then they just start to feel like this mothering thing is really hard. And it's not the mothering and it's not your kids. It's that you don't have the supports that you deserve to perform a role that is so important and should be valued and should be hailed. And really, I believe like mothers are just incredible. And at every turn, they should be told that.
This is a little bit off topic, but whenever I have any kind of vaginal health issue, which is all of the fucking time, because again, there's so much biological injustice.
So true.
Like it's just our stuff is in the inside and their stuff is out on the outside, and it just means we have more going on. And so like I've done whatever. I've shared a lot about my vaginal health issues, so I won't go too deep into it. But every time I'm like, wait a minute, I get BV because I took medication to get my yeast infection fixed, and the yeast infection medication causes a UTI. You know, pregnancy, the amount of like STIs or even AIDS, like people don't realize like even AIDS is, women are more likely to contract it because again, a biological thing of like it's on the inside. That's the scientific term. That's how they explain it. It's on the inside. But no, it's true, right? Like there's so many difficulties, right? Or just things that women have to deal with that men don't have to deal with. Childbirth, obviously, being one of the main ones. And so whenever our government or any man in that place has the audacity to make things harder than they already are, I just get so enraged because I'm like, all you should be doing is making it the easiest possible for women to have what they need, for women to be happy, satisfied, and mentally strong. Because look at everything that rides on us and the responsibilities that we have. Like, I don't even mind having more responsibilities. I just don't want to be like punished for it, / like, again, you know, have some politician tell me what I can't do with my body when it's like, you don't even know where my uterus, you don't even know where the clitoris is. Like, how dare you? We should just get more. And often I think it sets up men to fail in heterosexual relationships because our government has failed us, right? Like the priorities of policy wise aren't there. And so you have data that shows that we're going to nerd out now. You
Back to the data
that shows that in countries where there's better parental leave for men, and very often sometimes it has to be the default, right? The daddy leave gets lost if it's not taken. There's sort of these like incentives and like that are put in place for the policy to work. Men do more inside the home.
Absolutely.
Not because they're nagged, not because they're shamed, because the policy is framing is that this is your house too. These are your kids, and you being involved is a good thing.
And there's actual research on their brains changing.
Yes,
right?
Tell us about that.
Your brain changes when you're in caretaking roles, and so we've seen, you know, throughout a lot of American history, sadly, so many dads felt very separate of the home and from their children, and from their partners once a child was born, because they just were not included, or they didn't have this transformation that needs to take place for you to become a caretaker. Versus if you study the brains of any caretaker, including birthing person or their partner, if you're around a newborn baby and you're around that dependent, truly they depend on you for every possible thing. That is like the greatest transformation that happens when you become a parent, is you suddenly realize, wow, like they weren't joking, every single thing you depend on me for. You start to shift, and your brain is shifting, and it's making different priorities, and that is really necessary, especially for dads, because as women, if you're going to be holding that child and you're pregnant with them, you're already shifting because you're starting to realize certain things and you're like, oh, okay, well, I have to eat differently or, make some different activity choices or whatever it is.
You're putting someone before yourself.
Already, you're kind of getting that training a little bit earlier. And so it's actually really critical for men to still be a part of the unit, to take that time, especially while that child fully depends on you, because you actually can see in the brain of caretakers a shift in their brains and their capacity to take care of others.
Damn, that is so, if there's one argument for it, it should be that. Your brain on caretaking is great. Okay, I want to pivot. There's so many things I want to talk to you about, but trad wives, right? They have sort of popularized that invisible labor in a way, right? You could think, wait, this is a net positive in a way because we're seeing what that work is, of taking care of kids, of cooking, of all of the domestic labor that goes into it. Yeah. But at the same time, it is used in a way that is like
control other women.
To control everyone.
So my thing with trad wives is I have no issue with them, really. Like if they want to be at home and make their meals from scratch and be the primary caretakers and good, like that's great for them. Love that for you. Problem is when it's used as propaganda to then tell other people and other women and other families how they need to operate, right? If trad wives were making content just saying like, hi, I'm so-and-so and these are things I like to do, I think a lot of people would be like, oh, that's really lovely. Like, I like that recipe. Cool. Yeah. I might take something from that. It's when it becomes this antagonistic, like, what are liberal women doing? Right. And, why would you tell me that this life that I get to live, there's something wrong with it? That's where I start to have a problem with it. And I just talk a lot in the book, and these are the moments where I'm referencing that you could say, like, this applies to trad wives as well, is I'm just an advocate for choice. Yeah. I'm an advocate for people being able to live their lives the way they want to live their lives. And for instance, I married my college sweetheart. We have 3 children. We are in a monogamous, like probably a boring marriage that a lot of other people would say was boring, but that we love. I am somebody who is anti-patriarchal and who fully believes that people should be able to live how they want to live. And so I am just saying I live my life this way, and I think we all should have choices. And I wish more trad wives could just approach it that way, because then we would all be like, live your life, sis. Like, great for you. Right. And I want to have more of those kinds of conversations. I think there's too many Americans who think that they have to tell other people how to live. Yeah. That's the problem.
Or again, just a malformed like argument. Like they often, again, the argument is, why would you tell me this is wrong? And it's like, feminism is the reason you can do that.
Exactly.
Because feminism is the reason you can choose. Yeah. Right? And that can be your life, and that if you change your mind, you're allowed. Yeah. Right? And not that your husband is going to determine that decision for you, or again, the government. Exactly. And so I think that argument of like is one of our greatest. I mean, they've done such a good job of just framing us as somehow being anti-stay-at-home mom, when, like, to your point, everything you've talked about so far is like, let's value women who work at home. Let's call it work. Yeah. Trad wives are also working moms. Yeah. Okay? Like, they're literally working.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work to be an influencer. They're recording themselves. Also that, they're doing brand deals.
They're
making money off of this content all day. They're recording things. Like, even Ballerina Farm has to have nannies so that she can record her videos. Yeah. That's work. Okay? Yeah. So yes, you're sort of showing this lifestyle of being a stay-at-home mom, but you're actually a working mother.
That is such a good point. Like, I would be curious where their checks are going. Like, is it that they believe that their husbands should be in charge of the decisions with the finances that they're bringing to the table?
She's probably making, her husband is really wealthy, but I think some of these trad wives are probably making more money than their husbands.
Probably.
And maybe their husbands, again, need to pitch in because they're out making a brand deal. Or again, what's her name? The main one.
Don't follow them.
Okay, one of them is always on a shoot. Like, Nara Smith is very often on a plane. Like, I just look at her Instagram stories, and I'm, again, not at all like saying she's, attacking her character as a mother, but she's definitely,
and you're not there every single day.
You're not really a traditional. So it really actually is so similar to Phyllis Schlafly in the 70s, who was again the poster child of stopping the ERA, and again encouraging women to stay at home and being against women being out in the workforce. When she was out in the workforce, make sure that the ERA didn't pass. past, working basically most days outside the home and not being there with her kids. So it's a really
ironic.
It's hypocritical. It's very confusing, and we are calling it out.
Yeah, but I do think we can remove some of the power of this like notion that they are going to be the holders of what all women should do if we all also felt less antagonized by them.
Sure.
Like, I don't feel at all myself. I don't feel, even if I see one of these videos that's, I think one of the most famous ones is she's, standing there and all her children are around her and like she's baking and the husband comes and gives her a kiss on the cheek and she's like, how much propaganda did I have to, see in order to think that something was wrong with this picture, right?
I've seen that.
I look at that and I'm like, okay, I mean, like, good for you. Like, glad you're living the life that you want to live.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. I think when we feed into it and we're like, like you're setting us all back, we kind of sometimes give power to it in a way that they want us to. Versus I'm curious what would happen if young women see these images and they don't understand the history behind all of this. They don't understand that there were laws in place that said that women couldn't have their own credit cards and that men did need to, control women at every turn and that a woman's body was her man's body, to control. That's when things start to get very consequential and dangerous. But on their individual level, no, it's fine. Like, if some moms want to do that, I think that's okay too.
And in a way, I think that the trad wife like fantasy, because my niece is 12 and her best friend wants to be a trad wife when she grows up, basically because she loves perfume and money. It was her explanation for it. And obviously my niece, who is around people like me and people who birthed me, so you can imagine the values she does not have. Her dream is to work from home and have a dog and not have kids. Which might change, okay? But it sort of, I think that under that fantasy, all of what it represents, that also goes with like being a stay-at-home girlfriend, the soft life. It's a reaction, again, not to sort of motherhood or being like a working woman in the world and having your own money. I think it's a reaction to capitalism.
I agree.
And against this sort of like thing, I think especially for young people, they're like, at least with millennials, we kind of had a moment of like golden age, like, oh, we can, sort of have a job that we care about that makes the world a better place and we can make money and things will keep going better and I'll get promoted. And obviously that all fell apart. But Gen Z and I think younger people didn't even have that. They're coming of age in a time where the economy's a mess. The worst people are in charge and like literally people who feel less there's sort of no adults in charge. I think we, especially again in the 2010s, not to say everything was perfect, there were literally like war criminals in charge, but like you had a sense that like things were going to get better. And now I think things only kind of get worse.
And there's no like guaranteed path to anything in the United States, and so people are feeling really exhausted. I mean, I can relate to that, and I agree. I think these trad wives are not able maybe to vocalize that and say something is wrong if I can't stay at home with my children and I need to work outside of the home. Like families in the United States, you need dual incomes. You need, if not, like your children are starting to work at earlier, like things that a lot of American families are like, something's wrong with that. Where they're pointing the blame is the problem, right? It's not feminism. That's not the issue, right? It is fully capitalism. And actually it brings me to some other reel that I saw, and I can't remember, I don't know who to give credit to, but it was about how trad wives talk about how feminism made it so that women, especially white women, no longer were able to like their own meals, and like that we are like eating out of boxes and out
girl
of
dinner,
whatever,
like weaponizing kind of girl stuff. Dinner against us.
But then this awesome Black female historian was like, that's not who you should blame. Like, in fact, if you go back to the past, it was actually when slavery was no longer legal that they started to put things in boxes, because a lot of these families didn't actually know how to make these recipes themselves. It was like Black people who were coming into homes and cooking these recipes. Like, if you really think about a lot of the history of this nation, a lot of families were relying on other people to do this kind of work for them. And there's this example of, the horrible Aunt Jemima trope, but there was a box of like pancake mix that initially was called a slave in a box. that really is what you should be critiquing. You know, somehow feminists told you all to get out of the house and you need to be working, and now you've lost all knowledge of how to make things from scratch. I mean, maybe if you went back in some of your family history, you might not have ever known how to do that. Somebody else was doing it for you. So I just think that there's a lot of fascinating conversations to be had around it. They're not always the ones that are equipped to do that. And they're certainly placing blame on the wrong places. But like you said, there is a reason why a lot of people are falling out of love with like a capitalist society that requires each of us to work 24/7. That's exhausting.
Yeah.
So I understand why there are a lot of women who would say, why have I been told to not be at home living a softer life with my children?
Right. And yeah, in your book, you know, you talk about Black women have also been prevented from being mothers, right? And during the time of slavery, you know, they were, you know, had children against their will at times through rape and sexual assault, but then also would have those children taken away from them. Yeah, I think all, you know, and the trad wife movement is obviously, again, as you've mentioned, super white. And it's this aspirational, again, it's like we talked about Sheryl Sandberg earlier, like it's almost like a weird Sheryl Sandberg-ish like version, right? Like it's a little apocalyptic. Can you speak a little bit about that?
It was really interesting for me when I was writing my first book, The Three Mothers, and I was doing
It's an incredible book, by the way. Anna wrote an incredible book called Three Mothers, which was a best-selling New York Times bestseller about the mothers of James Baldwin, Malcolm X, and MLK. And in many ways, you literally created archival information about their mothers, even though they talked about their mothers all the time. It was never recorded. And so you've done an incredible service to this country and history.
Aw, thank you so
but
much.
please go on.
Thank you. Yeah, I was doing this deep dive into motherhood when I wrote that. And it was also the subject of my doctoral dissertation. So I had to get really deep into the theory of mothering in the United States and the history of it and all these other factors that are associated with our experiences of mothering. And also very particularly how mothering is really different for Black women in the United States based off of histories of slavery. And so a lot of white feminist literature would often speak about mothering as the reproduction of patriarchy. A lot of feminists would say, you know, maybe women just need to stop having children. And like you can go on a deep, like into many different holes around this kind of research, but there's books that suggested, you know, women should just go start other societies with like sperm donations and like leave the men out of it entirely. Like there's this whole thing about like,
I mean, I see that on TikTok all the time. I see many versions of it.
Yeah, there's these versions. But then when I started to look more into Black feminist scholarship around motherhood, the treatment of mothering and the thoughts around mothering were very different. And many more scholars started to say things like, well, children are the ways in which our world starts over. And so I quote June Jordan all the time, but I just think it's such a powerful quote that brings it all together. She said, every time a child is born, the world begins again. And when you can be the steward of that and the kind of transformation that our world requires, it gives such an honor to the role of motherhood, especially for Black women who, by law, historically in the United States, we were the only group that by law was told we were the birthers of non-life through our children, that our children were somebody else's property, and that this was what the law stated. But Black women never believed that. Black women never subscribed to that. So Black women have this awareness of just how made up it all is and how it's just not sufficient. If it doesn't acknowledge our humanity, it doesn't acknowledge our children's humanity, then clearly something needs to change. And so Black women have, in so many ways, reclaimed their own humanity, but also made it so that this nation saw things through our eyes. And so there is a different kind of belief around mothering for Black women. For us, it has more of a tradition of transformation, revolution, reclaiming of your joy, creating new worlds, just being able to envision beyond what's being offered to us.
You have such a sharper lens for seeing through the bullshit of what you're told, right? Because to your point, you know, being told these aren't your children, or, you know, the history of Black Black women having to breastfeed white children, and just again the amount of gaslighting, like medical gaslighting that was happening or that still happens for Black women. I think it, you know, perhaps makes you more of a independent thinker, right? Like, and more wary of the messages that are out there. Whereas that's super interesting. The whole like 4B, or just this idea that I think a lot of white women have online, or again in these feminist texts, which, you know, or the Lavender Menace, right? Like these texts are written by lesbians in the 80s, but like this whole idea of like, oh, we'll just get rid of men and that'll fix it for Black women. Obviously that's like not at all like the solution to anything.
No, because I mean, it also brings up, I mean, not to go too deep into the theory of the second book, but we have to kind of understand how founding fathers defined humanity in the United States and how they were leaving so many people out of those definitions. It helps us to better understand people's reactions to that. So I break it down by saying that our founding fathers defined man in the Constitution as those who could own land, those who could vote, those who could represent themselves in business decisions without needing somebody else there representing them. But we know from that definition, they were not talking about Black men who were enslaved. They were not talking about immigrant people. They were not talking about poor white men. They were not talking about non-binary people. And then they don't talk about women at all in the Constitution. They completely leave women out of it. But in letters that they wrote to their loved ones, you know, their daughters, their wives, they say that women are supposed to solely reproduce the power of men through children. And that's how they saw that role, and that they needed to protect those vessels, and that women couldn't think for themselves and that they shouldn't participate politically. And then again, of course, we see it's setting up this very problematic binary. It's setting up a place where white men have power over white women, but it's also excluding so many different people from accessing humanity in the United States.
It would have excluded most people
exactly.
in America today, right?
Exactly.
If you use those terms, right, of again what land owning meant at the time.
Exactly. And so like for Black men also, like if we're talking about that theory that says, oh, we just need to get rid of all men, well, actually it's more complex than that. And in the book I quote Bell Hooks, who reminds Black men that they need to choose revolutionary manhood and not choose this kind of path to manhood that they were sold by this notion that the founding fathers had in mind of what it means to be man. So many people feel their path to being treated with dignity and respect is to adhere to this initial social order that the founding fathers created, because people can be tricked into thinking that's how I will have all of my needs met. I just need to play that role better. Instead of remembering, no, that was made up and you were never included in that to begin with. So that's not the thing you should be aspiring to. You should actually be creating something new. And so often I think when we're talking about patriarchy in these like sweeping ways, we're assuming that we're critiquing all men. We're not. You know, I think we're actually critiquing a system.
Also, I feel like I came up with a solution. Tell me if you like it. I become a trad dad.
Okay.
What if it's like I coach the soccer team. I burn burgers, you know, at the barbecue. I like make Rice Krispie squares from scratch, which is, you know, really hard.
Okay.
And then I get congratulated, you know, like what if we made trad dads? What if women, I don't know.
What would the trad dad look like?
I don't know. That's it. We have to reimagine it. Maybe that's the revolutionary. No, I don't mean to.
You're always so good at that. No. It's like, it's for the love of men all over. Yeah, exactly.
I became for the love of trad dads. It was the next book. Okay, we're doing it. Are you ready to move into some boy problems?
Yes.
Because I have a feeling you're going to be really fucking good at answering
I'm excited.
these.
Okay, yeah, I know nothing about it.
No, you're an expert. Let me tell you. Okay, so here's the first one. Recently, I was visiting my husband's family in Africa, and we were traveling back home. We got to the airport later than I like. Airport anxiety. And the lines and customs to get to our gate were taking longer than expected. I got really anxious and nervous, and I started crying. He did his best to reassure me, but he did say, I bet this is tough because you've had a nice life where bad things or hard things don't happen. I've been thinking about that ever since, and I'd like to have your take. True, I grew up white and in America, but also I've worked really hard and I'm a Virgo. To plan ahead is to keep myself safe for my whole life. Was his point valid and I just had a panic attack, or was he dismissing me and my anxiety? And I guess the bigger question is, do you have any advice for me navigating this relationship and marriage with a person who grew up so differently than me?
Yeah, okay, I could tell from the beginning this was a mixed race relationship because she said we went to Africa. I was like, okay, love you, but like where in Africa? Let's specify. It's a continent. But putting that aside, yes, both things can be true, where she wanted validation in that moment, where she's feeling anxious about travel. And like, again, depending on where you were in the continent, it was a lot of travel to get there.
Sure.
And it is exhausting. And all of that makes sense. And there can be a moment for him to acknowledge that and say, yeah, babe, that was tiring. Like, that's all we really needed in that moment.
Yeah.
But it also seems to me like maybe he has some feelings about other experiences they've had.
That's what that sounds like.
There's more there. I doubt this was maybe the first time he'd thought, oh, like we grew up a little bit differently. Maybe she had some more comforts in her life or some more privileges than I did. And it's interesting because it sometimes comes up in my relationship. My husband and I both grew up very differently. I grew up nomadically, like moving from country to country abroad. Both my parents were lawyers. I had access to a lot of privileges. And my husband grew up in a different situation. And I think that at the beginning of our relationship, I often felt like if he kind of commented on that, I felt the need to be like, but I've been through hard things too. And it's like, no, I mean, that's true. There have been things that I didn't have to deal with that he dealt with. And I could also just kind of give him that feedback and say, yeah, but if you could, not maybe deliver the message that way, or when I really truly am experiencing something that I'm struggling with, if you can just see me as an individual rather than the circumstance that you and I grew up differently, I'd really appreciate that. While also being able to acknowledge for myself, it's true. There's certain comforts that I had that he didn't.
Yeah. That's such a good answer. I don't even want to add anything.
Please do add.
No, I just think that's so, compassionate to both people, right? Which is like, your POV is important. I've been in line at customs. It is a stressful situation, and
there's
sometimes
a time change.
Yes, and you're tired. You just landed. Like flying again. There's a David Sedaris line. It's like whenever you have like a travel issue, you're like, why aren't the newspapers reporting this? Like, why isn't this the headline in every newspaper that my flight was delayed by 45 minutes, right? Because like to anyone else, it's not a big deal, but to you it is.
Everyone
and so,
cares.
and I feel like I've been there. I went to the Dominican Republic with my friend Lee Ron. This was like 10 years ago. We were like 29. I think he grew up richer than me, but like I'm just more annoyed by travel things. And again, there was like a passport issue, and I have form anxiety, which I blame on ADHD, but I don't know if it's that or I hate forms, but it's very taxing for me to do it takes a lot of energy from my brain.
That's real.
And I wasn't like having a meltdown. I just was impatient. And he said something similar. He didn't say the same thing. He said something like, well, that's just life, And I remember feeling a little like, what do you mean? But then I was like, yeah, that's true. Like, it's already annoying. Like, we're at the airport and then I'm complaining on top of it, Like, sometimes when you're upset, it's because there's a grain of salt. There's like kind of like a truth to that.
That's very true.
And you did grow up differently, right? So like there is that thing. And so, I don't think either of you are right or wrong. I think you grew up differently. I agree that like probably maybe there are other instances where this has come up for him and he hasn't said anything. And so maybe you just want to chat it out, talk about it. Yeah, like I was seeing someone and he said something like, about camping, or I don't remember. And I was like, yeah, like I'm more of a Hamptons girl. And like he was like, yeah, I could tell. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, and I was like, I called myself that. I can't be mad that
exactly.
he assumed I was a
agreed
Hamptons
with you.
girl. But he was like, yeah, I can see that. And I was like,
now I'm offended.
And I am. I'm
offended.
I'm like, yeah, it's really because you said it. So yeah, I think this is normal. I think this is great.
Yeah.
You're like, talk about it. I just think there's never something there's no downside to talking about things in a loving, kind way.
Yeah. And also I just think a lot of men struggle with validation. We know this, right? Men have a really, really hard time with this one. So,
yes, when there's nothing they can do about a situation, they feel like a failure. And it's like, no, I just need you to like hold me while I cry. Yeah. And like, that's literally all I need you to do.
Because it wasn't necessary in that moment for him to be like, you grew up privileged.
Right. That was not helpful. Yeah, that does not help the panic
We're
attack.
tired, okay?
Yes. Okay, next question. All I want is to channel my inner Samantha Jones. For those who don't listen to Sex and the City, because I know there are a lot of men who listen to this show.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
And it's okay if you didn't listen to Sex and the City, or if you're not a man and you haven't listened to it. Samantha Jones is like the
sex one.
The sex one. Okay, she likes having liberated. A lot of sex. She's super liberated. Okay, so all I want to do is channel my inner Samantha Jones, but I'm doing it in North Carolina, where the dating pool is like 70% Trump voters and 30% guys who say, I don't really follow politics. I'm trying to have a casual, sexy summer, but I don't know if I can shut off the part of my brain screaming, he probably stormed the Capitol.
Oh, no.
Can I just let go and enjoy a hot night without selling out my values? Or do I owe it to the sisterhood to ask straight up, did you vote for Trump before even sharing a drink?
Wow.
So that's a good... This is on the minds of a lot of people.
I mean, listen, I think I'm a very big fan of women doing what they want to do. We talked a little bit about this earlier. It's like the choices you want to make in life. Like, yes, I support them. I love it. It just depends on what you want out of these people. If you're literally just trying to have sex with them, good for you. There's really no need to know who they voted for. I mean, some people might have some kind of kink for like, we vote differently.
Wait, I think I do.
I mean, I've seen you going and talking to these men that these all over different cities. Like, what do you vote for? Do you understand these things? I mean, maybe there is some kind of attraction there.
I've been at Trump rallies where I've been like, oh man, I would get to know you if I didn't already know you.
I personally have never felt that way, but like, I support you if you feel that way. There's nothing wrong with it.
It's a non-starter, right? Like, it's never gonna work.
Yeah, well, because if you want a relationship, that's different.
Yes.
If you want a relationship with this person and you're thinking of like, I'm looking for who I want to build a family with someday, like, no, if your politics don't align, that's going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
If you want to just have sex, okay, well then go ahead. I personally don't think that you're doing anything wrong for the sisterhood.
I don't think so.
If anything, like, maybe they somehow do fall in love with you and you can help them politically like make better decisions with their life, but like, you can just have your fun and move along. I think women have a lot of a harder time just having fun. But I should also acknowledge...
Wait, tell me more about that.
Well, first, I think, again, not all women need to be this way either.
Hashtag not all women, okay?
Everything is that. I will always come back to that. We don't all need these things. Some of us are not as... We don't want to have sex with everybody. That's also fine, too. Yes. But for friends who do, I think it's just that we also feel judgment. We feel this sense of, like, obligation beyond that kind of carnal act of having a desire to experience pleasure with someone that you barely know. And many men have been told that that's okay, but women, there always has to be something more meaningful. And we've been taught that. Yeah,
I think it's positive to have sex with Trump supporters. I'm just gonna say it.
Okay, great.
Because I think
very positive.
With a condom. Just make sure you're not getting into a longer term situation that you don't want to be in. And there's more, consequences for women with sex. I think that's one of the main reasons, right? We're kind of programmed, nurture nature. We're not getting into that, okay, right now. But for all the reasons, we do think, is this going to be a long-term person, right? Like, as opposed to, like, even I remember talking to this woman a couple years ago. She was like friends with this guy I was dating. So I didn't know her well, but she was just talking about this guy she had just slept with, and she was like, I feel like he doesn't really like want to be with me. And I'm like, do you want to be with him? And she was like, no. And I was like, girl, then
why
great.
are we concerned about it?
Yeah, it's almost like for women, we go immediately, he has to want to be with me so that he's worthy of me, or again, for me to have sex with him. And like, I think that's a faulty, or again, for some women that's right, and like that's right for you, but ask yourself if that's right for you.
Yeah, and sort of why you might feel that way.
Yes.
Like, what is going on? We all exist within like the context of what we've been taught
within
since
the
we
context. Thank you for bringing that up.
And like the history behind all of it. And I think just the more aware we are of why we feel certain ways, that you can just become more clear on the decisions you actually want to make for yourself versus our general category of can women do this? Like, do what you want to do.
Right.
And that's great.
Yeah. And break his heart. That's,
Yeah, it was your political agenda all along. It's like, that's why it's positive.
Just make him fall in love with a progressive woman and make him turn away from the dark side.
It's possible.
Because this is a thing I do tell people all the time, and I get it. I think there was this pressure, I would say like 2016 around, like, which is, I don't even want to think about, that was 9 years ago. I can't acknowledge that.
Time.
That was not 10 years ago. But there was this sort of idea of like, you have to keep family members and like romantic partners, like you have friends, you have to keep these people in your life so that you can change their minds.
Help them.
And I do think that we we've a little bit moved away because I think there's been way more radicalization, and I think it's not just like, oh, my uncle is like a weirdo or like kind of like makes sexist jokes. It's like my uncle thinks cell phones are, you know, space Jewish lasers. Like it's just reached a whole other level, and I think for a lot of people it's like, whoa, I don't even know how to interact with you. So I think there's more compassion for people who like can't be in a relationship, whether it's romantic or not, with a person that's like very diametrically opposed from them. But that being said, that's the most likely they are to be convinced.
Exactly.
You know, like I publicized this last summer, flirt canvassing. You know, I would go to swing states and I would go to bars and I would hit on guys. And then, like,
those were the videos I was referring to.
Yeah, exactly. And I changed one vote that I know for sure.
That's beautiful.
And I did have to go on 2 dates with him in Atlanta, but it worked. And it was worth it. It did not swing things, obviously, our way, the planet's way, I would argue, but it is like, because he, you know, was on a date with, and it's not because he wanted me to like him, by the way. It's just that we sat down together and he was like, oh, I respect you, and you know, we're actually in agreement on a lot of things. And then I was like, do you know that like your future girlfriend might bleed to death in a parking lot if she doesn't have access to abortion? And he was like, I didn't know that. So I believe in it. I think you should have a hot girl summer. I'm also pro hot girl summer. Be with whoever.
There's also just been like in the last 9 years more of a shift towards breaking up with people, whether that's friendships or your own parents or all of the above. And it hasn't been long enough that we know, is that actually the way to go? Or is it still worth trying to mend some of those relationships, or should you just cold turkey cut them off? Who knows, right? And I think on each individual base, there's going to be some different conversations and decisions to be made. But I personally don't mind being in conversation with people who I feel really differently about the world. You know, like we're seeing the world very differently, I should say.
You don't mind? You don't get annoyed or upset or like overstimulated?
I personally don't. I think probably because I grew up moving from place to place to place. I met so many people. Some of them are still some of my best friends to this day, and their families would say I was like a second daughter to them, but who maybe at times are voting in ways that I would disagree with. And I just think that we have to, again, have more nuance in our conversations. Like the more that we are unwilling to even interact with each other, and the more that we feel like, oh, you feel differently, so now I need to like kind of categorize you and call you a name, and you're going to do that back to me, the less likely we're able to kind of move forward.
Totally.
And so, but I also like, I don't think that everybody has to feel this way. I am somebody who likes to talk to people who come from all different walks of life and who have different experiences and different opinions. And I actually see it as, and I think you're this way as well. It's kind of a fun challenge. I also love the people who are like, F it. No, you're cut out of my life. And like, I'm not here to educate you. I don't have the energy to do that. That's also great. But I personally, I have no issue talking to people who disagree.
Yeah. So I dated this guy right after the election. We kind of met 2 days before the election, which was a little wild. And he was definitely not a Trumper, but like more definitely like moderate than I'm used to. And I had some visceral reactions. I think we went a little far in the 2010s. Like I think we did go like, you're bad if you're friends with these people. And actually I learned so much about my own positions on things through those like I learned more about actually progressive values and messaging and just politics in general through having conversations with someone who was different than me than I do like being surrounded by like an echo chamber, right?
So true.
So yeah, I encourage it. Basically, go out. Yeah, we're enabling you to.
I mean, we got way off her question, but yes.
I know. I don't think so. I think this is great. We're super excited for you. Write back in and tell us about what happened on these dates.
I can't wait to find out.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to Boy Problems. You are a dream guest. I am so glad we did this in person because I've interviewed you before for Man Enough, but this was
virtual.
such a treat.
This was in real life.
everyone go get Erased: What American Patriarchy Has Hidden from Us from Anna Malaika Tubbs. It's an incredible read. I remember a year ago when we saw each other at a dinner party, you said it's like Caste but for gender. And if you haven't read Caste, it's the best book ever after Erased. And it is exactly that. It just gives such a forensic analysis of American patriarchy, and it is everything you've heard on this show and more. Just amazing data, amazing frameworks to think about these things, and compassion for all genders who have been under the system. So this was so fun. I'm gonna annoy you to come back.
No, I want to come back. There's so much we could get into, and I want to answer more of these questions.
I know. Okay, well, please write in for Anna and say this is for Anna, because we're gonna have her back, and that's how we'll lure her back.
Oh wait, I love that.
Problems.
Yeah. Specifically for me.
Thank you for coming on, and everyone, please go subscribe and review Boy Problems. We have really bad reviews on Apple Podcasts, and I hope my trolls aren't listening right now and they're like, we're gonna go do more.
No.
But please, whenever you talk about patriarchy, whenever you talk about racism, whenever you talk about a lot of things that make people feel prickly, a lot of people find you the wrong people, not the wrong people, but people who are not super open to that.
Yeah.
So please leave a review and subscribe and tell your friends to watch the show. And thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
We love you. Bye, everybody.
Love you too.